In this video, I'm going to share different ways that you can increase income from retirement accounts. I did a video recently about how you can generate income, and it's like you have an extra $250,000 or $500,000 or even $1 million in retirement savings by generating extra income. It's a little bit different way of thinking about things that I talk about here on my channel. So take a look at those videos. I'll put a link in the description. But in this video, I want to focus on how you can increase income from a traditional retirement account. Even when retirees have savings, income from those retirement savings can seem, income can seem really elusive and impossible to get with real yields still relatively low. Most retirement accounts are invested in a diversified portfolio of stock and bond index funds. So let's start there. The S&P 500 index, for example, is yielding around 1.3%. Now remember, this is yield. This isn't capital gains. This is income. This is dividend income that they're paying out. And IAF, which is a U.S. Treasury intermediate, longer term, a little bit longer term U.S. Treasury bond fund, it's an ETF, is yielding about 4.25% as of this recording. Now it'll be different by the time you watch this because the financial numbers are always changing, right? But that's about what they're yielding now, and that's still pretty low, especially if you factor in long-term inflation average of about 3%. That real yield is either negative or really, really low. And even though the 4.24% sounds pretty good, right, relative to where we've been for, the last few years, its bonds usually make up a smaller portion of portfolios. There are usually more stocks than there are bonds for most investors. So that's a really low yield. That's a really low income. So let me back up just a second and say, okay, well, we're talking about income and retirement mostly on this channel. So how does that work as with regard to this income from these ETFs I'm talking about, this stocks and bond portfolio? So most traditional retirement planning is based on, not most, all traditional retirement planning is based on withdrawing about 4% in retirement. So you take the total amount that you have saved for retirement and you withdraw 4% in that first year, and then every year after that you increase that amount for inflation. So that's how that works. Now that 4% withdrawal, remember, some of that is going to include that income, okay, from stocks and bonds. But we just saw that income's really low, right? That 1.3% is a negative income, negative yield after we consider inflation. That's called real return or real yield. And then the bonds are just barely, a little over 1%. So let's think about how you can increase the income from your portfolio. And I want to make some suggestions here. I've done another video on this called The Best Retirement Portfolio, where I explain this even more. So make sure you check out that video. I'll put a link to it in the description. Now, I want to say that I'm not making any recommendations here. I personally invest following a strategy that rotates from one asset class to another asset class. I might rotate into cash at times when things are really risky, or I may rotate a little bit higher into stocks or bonds or even gold or real estate or other commodities. And that's how I personally invest, because I am not a buy and hold investor based on that 60-40, 70-30 asset allocation model. But what I am doing is trying to open the possibility of higher income from retirement savings, because a lot of people have retirement savings, but they have no income from those retirement savings, no real income from those retirement savings, for the reasons that we just mentioned about the stocks and bonds and people being invested in those index funds. Now, if this seems really crazy or more complex than you want to get into, then consider hiring a financial advisor. You could even hire someone on an hourly basis to get you started without having to always incur that usually at least 1% wealth management fee. So if this is something that you're going to do, trying to increase the income from your retirement savings, then I suggest a lot of research and or understanding how stocks and bonds work relative to macroeconomics, and or working with a financial advisor. And I also say learn first, then hire your financial advisor. Don't just blindly hire someone without really understanding the basics of investments and what you want from your investments and what can be achieved, what type of financial advisors are. You can also check out my video on the 4 real types of financial advisors. Okay, I'll put a link in the description. Okay, so I explain all of this in my course, How to Retire When You Want and Fund Your Desired Lifestyle, including various ways that you can invest both alone and with financial advisors. I'll put a link to that in the description. Okay, so let's get started with the ways that you can increase the income from your retirement savings. The first thing that you can do, it seems like a no-brainer, but again, almost everybody's invested in index funds, and it's simply to invest in stocks that have higher dividends. What does that take? If you're in index funds, it takes getting out of those index funds and getting into a diversified portfolio that makes a lot of sense, of well-researched stocks that you yourself have picked out or that a financial advisor you've worked with has picked out for you. So let me throw out a couple of examples. Altria Group, which is the old Philip Morris from the old days, the tobacco company, it is yielding just over 9% as of this recording. That's an example. I can't tell you how many years I've seen Philip Morris / Altria Group on the list of high dividend payers, and me personally thinking, oh, there's no way they can keep that going. They sell tobacco and what a nasty business and all that. They're still churning along. It's been decades. They're still paying out these high dividends. And I get it. You may not want to invest in a tobacco company, but 9%, and they just keep churning out. Will they keep on? I don't know. I haven't researched them in years, but I'm throwing this out as an example. Okay, another one is Pfizer. Pfizer is now yielding over 6%. That's crazy. So these are examples of companies with very high yields. And let me throw out, and I've mentioned this in another video or two, I read about years ago, maybe a decade ago, a financial advisor was, for her clients, investing in high dividend paying stocks, and the average she was getting was about 5%. The stocks she was invested in were averaging around 5% a year in dividend income, and then she was hoping to achieve another 3% in capital gains on the assets that she was buying for her clients. That seems very reasonable. And this is just an example of what some financial advisors will do. So like I was saying earlier, if you want to work with a financial advisor, understand this kind of things and understand that this is doable and certainly possible. Now, let me say before I forget to mention, subscribe to my channel if you like this information and you want to see my videos come up in your YouTube feed. Okay. I also wouldn't mind it if you liked the video, if you like it, by clicking that little thumbs up. All right, let me give you another example of a higher yielding investment, and that is the Vanguard High Yield Corporate Bond Fund. It's yielding about 5.85% as of this recording. Again, I'm not recommending these investments at this time. I am giving examples of high income securities to get your juices flowing, to get you brainstorming about what might work for you. And okay, the next way that you can get higher income from more traditional investments, your portfolio, retirement portfolio, is by investing in something that, what I like to call them, slightly alternative assets. They're things like REITs and MLPs. Let me give you an example. The Altarian MLP ETF yields about 7.56% as of this recording. That's pretty high. So that is slightly alternative assets that are priced well, that are selling at reasonable rates relative to historical rates. I also have to throw that in. Can be a good way to increase income from your portfolio. I have to be so careful to make it really clear. I'm not recommending any of these things because this video is going to be up for years. I'm recommending that you do some research, hire an advisor if you need one, And these are solutions that make sense at different times. And I've used all these solutions over the years at various times. Okay, the next solution, one that I really like, but it does take a lot more expertise, is selling covered calls on stocks or ETFs that you own. So with this, you sell a call option, and it gives someone the option to purchase your what's called the underlying asset, that would be like your ETF or your stock, from you at a set price at a set time, and they can exercise that option before that set time, but it usually is the date that's specified in the option contract. And selling covered calls, the way I look at it is, the way I look at it for me is, if I already have the risk in the stock market anyway, and or the bond market, because I can do this, I can sell calls against bond ETFs or gold ETFs, any kind of ETFs. If I already have that risk anyway, and I'm going to because I'm invested most of the time, I may as well sell some out of the money covered calls for extra income. And the income is, oh gosh, 2, 3, 4 times that what you would get from dividends. So that makes sense for me. Now, there is a learning curve, absolutely. There are a few financial advisors that sell covered calls, but I will say this is one strategy where individual investors have a real edge, because covered calls are, there's not a lot of volume a lot of the times on the call options. So it is something that individual investors can do, where it's a little bit harder for most financial advisors or institutions to sell call options on a lot of securities, just because the volume is not there. Remember, above all, however you decide to invest and or increase income in your retirement account, if this is something you're looking to do, retire certain.